The attic had always smelled of dust and old wood, a scent that clung to memory like cobwebs to forgotten corners. I never meant to go up there. It was the kind of place you avoided without knowing why, the kind of silence that pressed on your chest and made you feel like you were intruding. But when the lawyers handed me the keys to my grandfather's house, I knew that attic would not let me leave without opening it. The attic had always existed in the background of my childhood, an unspoken boundary in a house that seemed to breathe on its own. Even when I was little, I remember standing at the bottom of that narrow staircase, staring up at the hatch with its frayed rope dangling like a warning. My mother used to tell me not to go up there, that it was full of things too old to matter anymore, and maybe she was right. But as the years went on, I realized that her avoidance had more to do with fear than neglect. The attic wasn't just forgotten, it was deliberately sealed away, as though something inside needed to be kept quiet. When I returned decades later, after my grandfather's death, that same feeling pressed down on me again, the weight of unspoken things, heavy and stale as the air itself. It was supposed to be a simple visit, nothing more than a few days to sort through what was left of the old mound's belongings. The lawyers said the property would eventually go to me, since I was the last living heir. That word, *heir*, felt strange, almost cruel, because the house didn't feel like an inheritance. It felt like a burden, one that hummed with the echoes of lives spent and secrets buried. The keys were cold in my hand, 3 of them bound by a rusted ring, and when I stepped into the house, it was as if the air itself recognized me. Dust motes spiraled in the faint light from the windows, the boards creaked with every hesitant step, and somewhere deep within the walls, something shifted. I didn't go to the attic right away. For 2 days I avoided it, convincing myself that I was too busy downstairs. I went through old photographs, yellowed papers, and the fragile remnants of a life that seemed both ordinary and haunted. My grandfather's handwriting appeared everywhere, on the backs of photos, in the margins of old ledgers, even carved faintly into the wooden arm of his favorite chair. He'd been meticulous, almost obsessive about recording things, but never about what truly mattered. There was no mention of my grandmother's disappearance, no diary explaining why he'd lived the last 20 years of his life alone, and no trace of the stories that had once filled the house with whispers. Yet somehow, every creak of the floorboards and every flicker of shadow seemed to hum with something unsaid, and it all led back to that one sealed door above the second-floor landing. By the 3rd evening, the feeling became unbearable. I could hear faint sounds from above, small, deliberate thuds, as if something heavy shifted in the dark whenever I wasn't looking. I told myself it was just the house settling, the kind of harmless noise old structures made, but deep down I didn't believe it. I think part of me already knew that whatever had been sealed in that attic wasn't just forgotten history, it was waiting. So I went up. The stairs complained under my weight, each step groaning louder than the last, until I reached the small hatch. The rope was brittle, the wood dry as bone. When I pulled it, a cloud of dust rained down, filling the air with the scent of old paper and mildew. I coughed and hesitated before pushing the ladder up, the creak echoing through the silence like a warning bell. The light from my phone barely reached beyond the opening, swallowed by the thick darkness above. For a moment, I thought about turning back, but then I felt it again, that strange pull, that whispering in the back of my mind that wasn't quite a voice but felt like one. It urged me forward, patient and familiar. The air grew colder as I climbed. My breath fogged in front of me, and the light from below narrowed to a faint square that seemed to retreat faster than it should have. The attic greeted me with stillness so dense it felt alive. My flashlight cut across mounds of forgotten furniture, covered shapes draped in white sheets like sleeping bodies. The walls were lined with old trunks, their edges worn and corners eaten away by time. Cobwebs hung from the rafters, thick as fabric, glistening faintly in the light. Everything was coated in dust, as if the room itself had been untouched for half a century. But it wasn't the stillness that unsettled me, it was the faint sense of order, as though someone had arranged everything with deliberate care before sealing it away. The rocking chair in the far corner faced the wall, its curved back outlined by a pale strip of light from a cracked window. Beside it stood an antique lamp that shouldn't have been working, yet a faint electrical hum buzzed around it. I remember brushing past an old chest and feeling the air stir unnaturally cold against my skin, like a breath. That was when I saw the loose floorboard near the far wall. It was subtle, almost hidden beneath a tattered rug. The edges were worn smooth, the kind of wear that only came from repeated handling. I knelt, brushing the dust away, and pried it open with the edge of a rusted screwdriver I found nearby. Beneath it was a small compartment, barely large enough to fit a box. My pulse quickened. Inside lay a wooden chest, darkened with age, its surface scarred with faint markings that might have once been letters or symbols. The latch came undone too easily, as if it had been waiting for my touch. When I lifted the lid, the smell hit me first: old ink, brittle parchment, and something else underneath, metallic and sharp, like dried blood. The letters were neatly stacked, tied together with black ribbon that had stiffened over time. There must have been 20, maybe more, each sealed with wax that had cracked with age. My grandfather's handwriting looped elegantly across every envelope. I didn't recognize the names at first, but they tugged at something deep within my memory, fragments of old stories, faces from photographs that hung crooked on the hallway wall downstairs. And then my flashlight caught one letter near the bottom, the ink darker, fresher, as if written much later. My name was on it, written in the same hand. The date below it was impossible. That was the moment I realized I hadn't found the letters. They had been left for me to find. I remember sitting on the attic floor, the dust thick around me like fog, the box of letters open before me. Time felt distorted there, as if every breath stirred ghosts from their long sleep. I had gone through half the stack before I even realized how late it was. Each letter was strange, addressed to people who had lived and died long before I was born, names from fading family trees, distant relatives whose faces I knew only from cracked photographs in the downstairs hall. The words inside were written in my grandfather's calm, deliberate handwriting, the same I'd seen on the labels of his medicine bottles and the margins of his ledgers. But what he wrote was anything but calm. Each letter began tenderly, with greetings and small remembrances, before descending into rambling confessions, apologies, warnings, and fragments of dreams he claimed were not his own. He wrote of hearing voices from the walls, of shadows that called him by name, of the sense that something beneath the house had been watching the family for generations. The further I read, the less these letters felt like correspondence and more like desperate messages meant to delay something inevitable. I might have stopped then, packed the box away, and pretended I never found it. But my name was already there, visible through the dim light, the ink catching the narrow beam of my flashlight. The envelope lay at the very bottom of the box, as though it had been buried on purpose, waiting until I had exhausted every other secret before seeing it. My fingers hesitated above it, trembling slightly, though I told myself it was only the cold. The handwriting was unmistakable, my grandfather's, but there was something different about this one. The loops of the letters were tighter, almost forced, as if his hand had been shaking when he wrote it. The wax seal was darker, the paper thicker, and the name written across the front was mine. Not my father's, not anyone else's, *mine*. For a long moment, I just stared at it. My mind raced through possible explanations. Maybe he had written it for me before he died, though no one had ever told him I would inherit the house. Maybe it was a coincidence, a letter to someone who shared my name. But that hope collapsed the moment I saw the date. September 18th, 1951. 3 decades before I was even born. The ink had not faded as much as the others. It looked almost fresh, as if it had been written yesterday, and I swear the paper felt warm against my palm when I picked it up. My breath hitched. The room felt smaller. The shadows around me seemed to lean closer, their silence sharper, expectant. I told myself I was imagining it, that there had to be a rational answer, because the alternative was something my mind refused to accept. Still, my hands would not stop shaking. I ran my thumb along the edge of the envelope, feeling the raised texture of the writing, the faint pulse of old ink beneath my skin. My name looked too alive, as though written with purpose rather than nostalgia. The longer I held it, the stronger the sensation became, a strange thrum beneath the surface, like a heartbeat trapped within the paper. I dropped it for a moment, startled, and it landed softly among the others, stirring the dust into thin spirals that rose and hung in the air like smoke. I sat there for what must have been an hour, staring at the envelope, unable to bring myself to open it. The attic's silence had changed, it wasn't empty anymore. It felt crowded somehow, as though invisible eyes were watching from the corners, waiting to see what I would do. The air had grown colder. A faint dripping sound echoed somewhere beyond the rafters, though there hadn't been rain in days. My flashlight flickered once, then steadied, its beam landing squarely on the envelope again. I remember whispering to myself, trying to convince myself that it was just paper. Just a letter. Just a coincidence. But even then, I knew it wasn't. The coincidence would have been easier to believe if the details didn't fit so perfectly. My name was uncommon. The ink looked too recent. And something inside me, a part one didn't recognize, knew that the letter had always been meant for me. It was as if time had folded in on itself, allowing my grandfather to reach through decades to find me. The thought unsettled me more than I could admit. I kept thinking about the way he'd looked in the last photograph ever taken of him, sitting in that same attic, his eyes not on the camera but fixed on something beyond it, as though he already knew I'd come back someday to find this. The more I stared at the letter, the more the rest of the attic seemed to fade around me. The smell of dust, the creak of wood, even the faint wind outside, it all drifted into a dull hum until there was only the envelope, glowing faintly in the beam of my light. My pulse matched its rhythm. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I opened it, something irreversible would happen, something that had been waiting for this moment for longer than I'd been alive. Still, I needed to know. I needed to understand why it existed, how it was written before my birth, and what my grandfather could possibly have to say to me across time. I reached for it again, slower this time, almost reverently. The wax seal cracked softly under my thumb, the sound too loud in the quiet. The paper inside was folded twice, the handwriting careful but hurried. I held it up to the light, and the first line made my breath catch completely. Asterisk to the one who finds this, know that I have failed you once already. Asterisk my vision blurred, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The attic seemed to tilt, the floor swaying beneath me. The shadows pressed closer, listening. The letter continued, every word colder than the one before. And though I tried to tell myself that it was only ink and paper, the part of me that still believed in logic began to die quietly in that moment, replaced by a slow, consuming dread that I would never fully escape. The letter was longer than I expected, its pages filled with a steady, slanted script that seemed almost mechanical in its precision. Yet beneath that control, there was panic, the kind that bleeds through even the neatest handwriting. My grandfather began with apologies that didn't make sense, apologies for things I hadn't done, for choices I hadn't made. He wrote about the family, about how the bloodline had been sustained through debt, a phrase that made no sense until I kept reading. He spoke of a promise made during the war, not to a person, but to something older, something he only called asterisk the keeper star. The words felt heavy on the page, and the further I read, the colder the air around me became, as though the attic itself remembered. He claimed he had been desperate to save the family name, to preserve the estate and protect his children from the ruin that followed so many others. But whatever he'd asked for in return had come at a cost, one life for every generation, a sacrifice that could not be refused. At first, I thought it had to be a metaphor, the delusions of a man slowly losing his mind. The war had changed him, everyone said so. Maybe this was just his way of explaining guilt or grief. But the more I read, the less it felt like madness. The details were too specific, the dates, the names, the events that lined up with real family tragedies. He wrote about his brother's death in 1945, how it hadn't been an accident during the bombing raid as the papers claimed. He said the keeper had chosen him, that the blood had to be repaid, and that the first life taken sealed the bond. My grandfather's handwriting wavered in that section, the lines darkened where the ink bled too heavily, as if his hand had trembled. He described the moment vividly, the sound of his brother's last breath, the sudden stillness afterward, and the voice that whispered through the smoke, promising safety for those who remained. He called it a pact written not on paper, but in blood and memory, binding each generation until the debt was settled. My stomach turned as I realized how many deaths had followed since then. Every decade, at least one member of the family had died mysteriously, some in accidents, some in sudden illness, others simply gone without explanation. My father had been one of them. I remembered his disappearance when I was young, how no body had ever been found, how my mother refused to talk about it. The letter mentioned him too. My grandfather wrote that he had tried to break the cycle, that he'd offered himself instead, but the keeper didn't accept substitutions. The debt chooses, he wrote. It knows who carries the mark, and it comes for them when the house remembers. I felt a chill crawl up my spine as I read those words aloud under my breath, the sound of my voice strange and hollow in the attic's still air. The light from my phone flickered again, and for a split second, I thought I heard something, a faint creak from the far corner, like a step on the old boards. I froze, listening, but it didn't come again. I forced myself to keep reading. The letter grew darker, more frantic toward the end. My grandfather claimed he had hidden the letters to warn whoever came after him, hoping that if the truth was known, the pattern could be stopped. He wrote that the keeper thrived on ignorance, that each generation's denial was what allowed it to persist. We forget, he said. That is how it survives. We bury the truth with our dead, and the debt continues. My hands were slick with sweat by then, my heart pounding in my ears. It didn't feel like I was reading a confession anymore, it felt like a transfer, like every word I absorbed was binding me to what came next. He described symbols carved beneath the house, sigils that tied the bloodline to the land itself. The Rowan estate wasn't just home, it was the anchor that kept the keeper bound. Destroying it would free the curse, but leaving it standing meant the family remained trapped, offering life after life as payment. He wrote about how he'd tried to burn it once, how the fire refused to spread, how the flames turned cold and blue before dying out. The house remembers, he repeated, and it will not let us leave until the debt is paid. I wanted to stop reading, but I couldn't. Something about the way his words flowed felt alive, like the letter was aware of being read. The paper vibrated faintly in my hands, or maybe it was just my imagination, but the sensation was unmistakable. He ended the letter by writing that he had sealed one final envelope, the last message, hidden where only the rightful heir would find it. That letter, he said, would contain the keeper's name, the name that, once spoken, would either end the curse or complete it forever. The last line made my blood run cold, *, you were not meant to exist, and yet you do. The balance has already begun to shift. Forgive me. *. I stared at those words for a long time, unable to move. The room felt suffocating, the shadows thick and pulsing in the corners. My flashlight dimmed again, and for a moment, I thought I saw movement, a ripple across the fabric draped over the old furniture, as if something had brushed past it. I told myself it was just air, just my nerves, but a soft sound followed, a faint, rhythmic tapping from beneath the floorboards. It came 3 times, paused, and then 3 times again, steady, deliberate. I tried to ignore it, to convince myself it was only the house settling, but when I looked down at the letter in my hands, the ink seemed darker than before, fresh and glistening, as though it had just been written. I folded the pages slowly, trying to keep my breathing steady. The air around me vibrated faintly, a low hum rising from the walls, or maybe from the floor beneath me. My grandfather's words echoed in my head, twisting into something that felt less like memory and more like prophecy. I realized then that the letter had not been a confession at all. It was an inheritance. The debt hadn't ended with him. It had simply been waiting for me. After that night, the house began to change. It started subtly, like the kind of unease you could explain away if you tried hard enough. A door left open that you were sure you had closed. A picture frame slightly tilted when you knew it hadn't been touched. The air itself felt different, denser, charged, as if the walls had begun to breathe in time with me. I tried to tell myself it was exhaustion, the byproduct of too little sleep and too much imagination, but deep down, I knew the truth. The moment I read my grandfather's letters aloud, something in the house had woken up. It was as if every word had been a key, turning in a lock that had been waiting for years. The first real sign came a few nights later. I woke up around 3 in the morning to the sound of a clock ticking. It shouldn't have stood out, there were old clocks all over the house, but this one was different. It wasn't steady. It was irregular, slow at first, then fast, as though it were mimicking a heartbeat. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, echoing faintly through the walls. When I got up and walked through the dark hallway, I realized it grew louder near the stairs leading to the attic. The moment I placed my hand on the railing, the ticking stopped. The silence that followed was so complete it felt alive. I stood there for a long time, waiting for something to move, to whisper, to prove that what I'd heard wasn't real. But nothing did. The next morning, I found the portraits in the upstairs corridor had changed. Not drastically, just enough to make me question my memory. The eyes of my grandfather's photograph seemed to follow me now, and my grandmother's faint smile had vanished. I leaned closer to inspect the glass and saw condensation forming inside the frame, tiny droplets trailing down her face like tears. I stepped back, heart pounding, and forced a laugh that didn't sound right. It was an old house, after all. Wood warped, glass fogged. There was always an explanation. But that illusion of reason shattered when I noticed the smallest frame, the one of my father, had fallen to the floor, the glass cracked clean across his face. That night, I dreamt of the attic. I saw the letters spread across the floor, the ink running like blood, seeping into the wood. A voice whispered my name over and over, soft and almost kind, but with something hollow beneath it. When I woke, my mouth tasted like ash. The air in the room was freezing, my breath visible in the dark. I sat up and froze when I realized the door was open. I never slept with it open. From the hallway came a faint sound, something like breathing, but too steady to be human. I listened for what felt like hours, until dawn finally broke and the light bled through the curtains, washing away the noise. Days passed in a blur of dread. I tried to leave the house twice. The first time, the car wouldn't start, no matter how many times I turned the key. The second time, the main gate had rusted shut overnight, the padlock fused solid as if welded. I told myself I would try again later, but I didn't. Some part of me already understood what was happening, the house wasn't going to let me go. Each evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, a low hum filled the walls again, rising and falling like distant chanting. the smell of old wood and dust grew sharper, tinged with something faintly metallic. I found footprints in the hallway, dust that didn't belong to me, are bare, small, and wet, leading from the attic door to the study, then vanishing into nothing. The voices came next. They began as whispers in the corners, barely audible, like a conversation happening in another room. I could never make out the words at first, just the tone, soft, coaxing, patient. Then one night, they began to form sentences. "You shouldn't have read it," one voice murmured. "It remembers you now," said another, fainter, as if it came from under the floor. I tried to drown them out, turned on the old record player in the parlor, but the needle scraped across the vinyl and played only static. Beneath that static, I could still hear them whispering my name. The house felt different after that, the walls pulsing with a low vibration like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me. I began to notice movement in the corner of my eyes, shadows that didn't vanish when I turned. Once, in the reflection of a window, I saw a figure standing in the hallway behind me, tall, thin, and motionless, its head tilted slightly as if studying me. When I turned, the hallway was empty, but the air carried a faint scent of burned wood. I stopped sleeping altogether. I started talking to the house, half begging, half demanding to know what it wanted. The silence that answered was worse than any voice. One night, I found the letters scattered on the living room floor. I hadn't taken them from the attic. They were arranged in a perfect circle, every seal broken, every page open to the last line. I picked up the letter addressed to me and saw that new words had appeared at the bottom, written in the same ink, though I knew it hadn't been there before. Asterisk, the debt moves through memory. To read is to awaken. Asterisk, my hand shook so badly the paper tore between my fingers. From somewhere deep within the house came the slow creak of a door opening. Then another. And another. It was as though the entire structure was stirring to life, stretching its bones. I could hear the faint sound of footsteps in the walls, soft, deliberate, matching my breathing. The clock began ticking again, louder this time, faster. I looked up and saw that the chandelier above me was swaying, though there was no breeze. I should have run, but my legs wouldn't move. All I could do was listen as the voices grew louder, overlapping in a whispering chorus, each one speaking my name with perfect clarity. And in that terrible symphony, I finally understood that the house wasn't haunted by the dead, it was haunted by the living memory of everyone who had ever tried to leave. By the time I realized what was happening, it was already too late to undo it. The letters had become a part of the house's rhythm, their words sinking into the air like dust, spreading quietly, invisibly. Each time I read one, the walls seemed to breathe deeper, the shadows lengthened, and the ticking returned stronger than before. It wasn't just me who felt it anymore. The few family members who still lived nearby began calling, complaining of strange dreams, of hearing whispers through their phone lines, of waking in the night to the sound of someone softly knocking on their bedroom walls. My aunt, who hadn't set foot in the estate for decades, said she'd found one of my grandfather's letters on her kitchen table, though I had all of them locked in a chest upstairs. She burned it, she said, but the next morning, the ashes had reformed into the same folded paper. That was when I understood that whatever had been sealed in those pages didn't belong to one place anymore, it belonged to us. I tried to warn them not to read anything, not to touch whatever appeared, but they didn't listen. My cousin opened his and was found dead the next morning, his face pale, his eyes open, his mouth twisted as if mid-scream. The letter he'd read was missing. Another cousin vanished entirely, his car found at the side of a forest road, headlights still on, driver's door open, the keys dangling in the ignition. When the police searched the woods, they said they found symbols carved into the trees, the same looping marks I'd seen etched beneath the attic floorboards. One officer said he heard voices whispering through the fog that night, but when he tried to follow the sound, it only led him back to the same clearing over and over again. The report said he resigned 2 days later. The house grew louder after that. Every night, something new stirred. The floors creaked beneath invisible steps, and the ticking came from inside the walls now, a frantic rhythm that synced with my heartbeat. The mirrors began to darken, turning cloudy as if something on the other side was pressing close, watching. Sometimes, when I passed by one too quickly, I'd see a reflection that didn't move with me, a face that lingered just a second too long. It wasn't always the same face. Sometimes it was my grandfather, sometimes my father, and once, I swear, it was me, older, thinner, eyes hollow as if drained of everything but recognition. I stopped turning on the lights because it didn't make a difference. The shadows moved on their own, independent of the darkness, as though the house had learned to make its own night. The remaining letters began to change. The ink shifted when I wasn't looking, the sentences twisting into new shapes. Some words blurred, others deepened. On the back of one, a line appeared in handwriting that wasn't my grandfather's. Do not open the last one. I stared at it for a long time, uncertain if it was a warning or an invitation. The final envelope lay at the bottom of the chest, sealed with black wax, heavier than it should have been. I could feel the weight of it even when I wasn't touching it, like a presence in the room. Every night, I would dream of it opening by itself, the paper unfurling like skin, the ink pulsing with a slow heartbeat. And each morning, I would wake to find the chest slightly ajar, the lid lifted just enough to make me question whether I'd closed it properly. I started to lose track of time. The house had its own schedule now, its own hours that ignored the sun. Sometimes dawn came too early, a sickly grey light that carried no warmth, and other times, night would linger far past when it should have ended. My body began to weaken, I slept less, ate less, spoke less. The phone lines went dead. The world outside seemed to fade. It was as though the house had sealed itself from reality, trapping me in its breathing walls. I knew what it wanted, I could feel it every time I walked past the chest. The keeper had waited long enough. The final letter was not meant to be hidden anymore. The last night came quietly. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and rain, though no storm had come. The ticking was louder than ever, faster, urgent. I followed it through the dark halls until I reached the study, where the portraits of the family hung in their neat, dusty rows. Every face was turned toward me now, eyes gleaming faintly in the candlelight. The chest sat open in the middle of the floor. The final letter was gone. I turned slowly, and there it was, resting on my grandfather's old desk, unfolded, the ink glistening as if freshly written. My name at the top again. My hand shook as I reached for it, though I already knew what I would find. The letter was shorter than the others, only one paragraph, written in hurried, uneven strokes. The keeper does not take what is owed. It collects what remembers. Each word read is a life returned. Each name spoken is a door reopened. You have read enough. The last line was written in darker ink, thick and deliberate. To stop it, the line must end. I stared at those words until they blurred. The air around me trembled. The portraits began to hum, the faces shifting, their mouths opening silently. I felt the floor tilt beneath me as the whispering began again, louder now, 1,000 overlapping voices chanting my name. Something moved behind me, slow, heavy, breathing. The light flickered once, twice, and went out. The whispering stopped. The ticking stopped. For the first time since I found the letters, there was absolute silence. Then I understood what the letter meant. The curse wasn't in the house or in the words, it was in the blood. Every reader, every descendant, was part of the cycle. To end it, the family line itself had to collapse. One by one, it already had. I was the last. The silence pressed tighter, and somewhere in it, I thought I heard a door close softly, as if the house were finally exhaling after a long, patient wait.